noise!
Hello and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm. Brought to you by funkinstuff.net, this is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I am your host, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine, musicologist, creative arts journalist, and multimedia pro. Whether you're watching the video version of this show or the audio-only podcast version, I thank you so much for your continued interest and support in this show. If you enjoy this programming, there are several ways to help support Truth and Rhythm, as well as contribute to further enhancements and expansion, plus get some sweet perks and rewards in the process. First, subscribe to the Funkin' Stuff channel on YouTube, which is where Truth and Rhythm lives, and be an advocate by spreading the word among fellow funk, jazz, and R&B music lovers. Second, join Truth and Rhythm's new membership program through Patreon, which features 3 tiers for truth believers, truth seekers, and truth crusaders. You can also submit a direct donation to the cause anytime at funkinstuff.net. At that site, which is loaded with awesome content, you can also purchase the book Everything's on the One, The First Guide of Funk, shop for official Truth and Rhythm and Funkin' Stuff merchandise, and use the Amazon links for all of your online purchases, which allocates a percentage to this show. Sponsorship opportunities are available as well. Contact me directly at scottg@funkinstuff.net. For those of you who go the extra step in supporting the show, you have my heartfelt gratitude for allowing us to continue to shine the light on those special artists whose quest is to find truth in rhythm. Hey, before we get started with today's show, I just want to draw your attention to new merchandise. Funkin' Stuff and Truth and Rhythm designs are in, and they look pretty darn cool. So show your support, help support the program, and show off some stylish merchandise and apparel. Only at the Funkin' Stuff store. I'm honored to welcome to the Truth and Rhythm Mothership celebrated and wonderfully distinctive singer-composer Lenny Williams. Becoming a star with a string of 1970s hits as Tower of Power's lead vocalist, he has released new music under his own name during 6 decades, and he continues to record and perform. Classics featuring his one-of-a-kind voice include So Very Hard to Go, What Is Hip, Don't Change Horses in the Middle of the Stream, Only So Much Oil on the Ground, Shoo, Foo Foo Ooh, Choosing You, Midnight Girl, 'Cause I Love You, Doing the Loop-de-Loop, and Don't Make Me Wait for Love. The latter was with Kenny G, and among the others, Williams has also worked with our Graham Central Station, Benny King, and the Crusaders Wilton Felder. In 2020, he released an album called Fine, and his newest single is called Tonight. Lenny, thank you so much for joining the show. How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually doing daddy duty today, helping my daughter. She's selling her house. And so we're over here packing. And yes, I have to be very gentle with all of the crystal and all of that good stuff like that. So it got me another profession over here. Yes.
Well, you know, she's lucky that you're still able-bodied and can pitch in like that.
Most definitely. I think I'm more lucky than her for being able-bodied. Yeah, right. But definitely, I'm grateful for that.
Well, we're grateful too. So grateful you're still doing music, and you know, congratulations getting back out there on the road, and it's all good news.
Yeah, it's it's been a journey, not only for me but for everybody. This last year and a half with the pandemic, COVID virus, and not doing any shows, and so as we got closer, to reopening date, I started practicing my shows, in front of the mirror or whatever, and And so I would, kind of be ready, sort of like shadow boxing or something like that with a boxer, getting ready for the real thing. But nothing's quite like the real thing, And so this is like this weekend was my third post COVID show. And so it's exciting. And I've got about 9 to 10 weeks of shows just lined up weekend after weekend. And so the little plans that my wife had for us to, do different things, and, they kind of all pushed back. And it's like, hey, we're back to the old normal is now the new normal. I'm working every weekend just about.
That's great. What's the most challenging aspect to sort of get back into the groove? Is it, getting your stamina back or getting your breathing back, or what is it?
Yeah, I guess just stamina, breathing. I walk every day, walk a couple of miles every day, and do push-ups every day. But it's I hear basketball players say, you look at a basketball player and he's got this beautiful body and young and athletic, and they said, well, being in shape is not the same as being in basketball shape. And so the same thing with the stage, because you're doing 2 or 3 things at once. You're moving around and you're singing and you're interacting with the audience if someone says something or whatever. And so the mind is multitasking, so to speak, and so plus you're got some movement going on. Hopefully you do. Yeah, right. Even if it's like an old folk shuffle or something, you're doing, something. And so, definitely. And then just singing and being in rhythm with the music, and, it can take a little toll on you, and so, people look at golfers and they don't put them in the same category of an athlete as, say, a football player or, a track star. Or same with people looking at, to say, a race car driver, so people look at a singer and you say, oh, just a singer, but there's a bunch of things going on, and your body has to respond to it, and you're using your lungs. And so, I would say that singing is really kind of an athletic thing. I never thought about that way, but you got to be in shape to do it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I always think of like Mick Jagger. I remember seeing him at shows long ago when they were doing the giant stadiums, and how much he runs up and down the runways and all the stuff he does physically. I'm like, man, and even at his age now, he does a lot of that. I'm like, the exercise routine has to be so rigorous.
Yeah, most definitely. I've got a video of Mick doing his dance lessons and things like that, and and I think that's real commendable. That you think that a person who's achieved certain heights that maybe they would kind of loaf it a little bit, but when you see other people out there doing vocal exercises or dance exercises, or even some type of calisthenic exercise to just boost their performance level, then it inspires you, and it's always something to inspire you and to aspire to.
And that's part of appreciating, the old school, if you will, because, it's not lip syncing. This is real singing while you're doing it.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
Difference.
Yeah, but I see the kids, they lip sync a lot because they, there's so much emphasis on movement and dancing now, and you see the young kids, doing all this dance, and they have to sing, and so they certain portions of their performance is taped. But even at that, I guess it's whatever the audience will accept. And so what was abhorrent, or what was not acceptable a decade or two ago is now acceptable. But even for that, they have to be in a fair amount of shape, and they definitely have to have coordination with the vocal to sell it. You know what I mean? That that they're singing or they're pantomiming, and it's it has to be in sync. And so you say the athletic portion, or the cardio that you need to make it happen is paramount.
Yeah, so it becomes that fine line between entertainment and singing, and I tend to lean toward the singing side of that equation. So,
well, I'm glad for people that love singers, because sometimes I do shows with people who really have a lot of movement and everything like that. And then, and I move too, but, maybe not to the extent that they do. And then, you just say, hey, I'm gonna get out there and I'm gonna stand there and I'm gonna sing, and people who appreciate singing, they enjoy that, And so I think that you have to always trust what you do best to get you through, any kind of performance, or no matter who you're performing with, opening act or headlining act, do you. And then that's the best way for you to reach the audience and, have a successful show.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lenny, I want to rewind on you a little bit right now. So we'll test those memory banks. But, you were born in Little Rock, then you moved, I guess, at a young age. I'm not sure what age, to the Bay Area. How old were you at that time?
I was pretty young. I think I was maybe 13, 14, 15 months old, somewhere around in there. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it's really young. So, how was it for you growing up in that incredibly musically rich and diverse part of the country? And, how did music get into your blood and gravitate you toward a career in music?
Well, I mean, growing up in Oakland, Oakland is just a tremendous, tremendous city. And I love it. I've been all over the world, and I just, Oakland's right at the top of my list. We have the Army base here. We have a naval base. And so you just had people coming through all the time from all over the United States, soldiers and sailors. And, some of them stayed, but they brought their taste with them, their food taste, their cultural taste, the musical taste. And so, and then we're so close to Mexico that, we had that influence in terms of music and, the Latin influence. And so, and then I lived in my grandparents lived in Bakersfield. So we'd go down there and, you had so many people from the South living there that you had the country music influence. And so, and when we moved to Oakland, we lived right in back of a church. And so I just walk out of my house and walk right over to the church. If I didn't go, the church came to me because, they were making so much noise in there playing, the guitars and the keyboards and singing. And so I was influenced by that. And then right down the street on the same block of the church was the radio station. So it's like, and then it's really weird when I think about it. And then right across the street from the church was the boxing gym. So the three things that I love the most, besides my family and everything, God and my family, is the church, gospel music, and the radio, of course, that plays music, and boxing. And they were all right there. All within steps. And so just growing up in a melting pot, or like Oakland is, and all the various influences. Even we had a lot right across the bay from San Francisco, so we had a lot of Asian, Chinese population, and so everything was right there. And you go to school, it's just like, okay, it's Chinese, there's there's the Latinos, African Americans. Unfortunately, when I was younger, when I was in elementary school, all the way up until the fifth grade, I didn't go to school with too many whites. It was kind of, it wasn't like the South where there was, enforced legal segregation, but, it was segregation by neighborhoods, and things like that. So I did go to school with a few white kids. But then when I got into the fifth grade, we moved to East Oakland, which had, it's like, oh, wow, half the class is white, and so all those influences, I was just things that I was interested in, from other cultural aspects and the music. And then I started playing trumpet in the I think it was the fourth grade. And so then I started playing all kinds of music, and I learned how to read music. So we're playing, John Philip Sousa and all this other kind of stuff. And then at home, I'm listening to, the radio and hearing Lloyd Price and Clyde McPhatter and, whomever. And then, just everything. And so I was just flooded with all types of music and all types of culture. And, here I am, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. As you're talking, Lenny, it's just bringing back some memories of my own, because I kind of went the opposite way. Up until fourth grade, I was in like a totally white school. And then we moved to Santa Monica, California. It was very integrated, and I got exposed to all that music, and that kind of started building my love of soul and funk and all of that, when I got immersed in that. And I played the saxophone at that age. So
Yeah.
yeah.
When I was in band, it was really interesting. I'd be over, I'm playing, trumpet and the brass, and I'd see the woodwinds over there, and they'd all be, moistening their reeds, and I was like, those guys are so lucky that probably that thing probably tastes good, and I'm thinking that there's this delicious taste there. And then finally, I got a chance to get somebody to, because you couldn't really spare them because the school was giving them to you, and so and I didn't want to taste one that somebody put all their saliva on, but finally somebody let me taste one, and it's like, oh, this is nothing, And I'm thinking I'm over there for a couple of years, just like salivating, wanting the taste the reed, and I finally got
hey, flavored reeds. Maybe that's a business idea.
Hey, yeah, right. Hey, we'll be on the Riviera with our feet up, somewhere, right, toasting each other, right? Hey,
yeah, time to Shark Tank that one. So, aside from those couple of people you mentioned, who are some of your top singing influences and heroes?
Yeah, when I listened to the radio, so I was influenced by so many different people. I like, Tennessee Ernie Ford, 16 Tons and Bobby Darin, and of course the Coasters and Little Richard, you name it, the Platters. But as I got older, the person that I honed in on was Sam Cooke. That I really thought that I'd like to be like him. Partially because he came from the church and I was in the church, and saw him segue out of that. And so, I was thinking, well, that's probably something that I could do. And then I was really inspired about his business acumen, that he owned his own record label, and, he owned his own publishing, and, I'd read the Jet magazine, and, he had a beautiful home and all of that with a swimming pool. And I thought, oh, I'd like to be like this guy, and of course he had hit records, one after another, one after another. And so Sam Cooke was probably the person that I, idolized, not only for the music, but for, a lot of other things. And so I tried to, pattern myself after him to a certain extent.
I know, Lenny, you cut your first singles, I think, in the late 60s. There were some singles that you did. How did you get your foot into the studio?
Well, they had a talent show in Oakland. Don Barksdale had a couple of radio stations. Well, he had radio station KDIA in Oakland, and Don Barksdale was African-American. He was a former basketball player. I think he played for the Celtics, but he was the first African-American to play basketball on the Olympic team for the United States. And so he was a businessman, and he had a couple of nightclubs. And he had a talent show every Thursday night. And I got talked into doing that by a friend of mine. And I would go down and I'd win all the time. And so, I built up a kind of like little reputation. And I was just kind of getting out of the church too, so nobody really knew me. It's just all of a sudden I'm this new guy on the scene. And one night there happened to be a guy there by the name of Ray Shanklin, who was the A&R for Fantasy Records. And they asked me if I wanted to make a record. And I was like, oh, yeah, of course. And so then I took me over to the studio in San Francisco. I met John Fogerty, who had a group called the Gollywogs at that time. And John was actually working in the stock room, and met Huey Lewis, who had a group called Clover at that time. And I think the big star for Fantasy Records at that time was Roger Collins, who had a record called She's Looking Good. And, we'd be back there in the studio trying to do our thing. And Roger would pull up in his Lincoln Continental, and Saul Zantz would come out. Oh, okay, you guys got to get the hell out of here. Here comes Roger. And so eventually, people started to develop, John hit big, and then, Huey hit big. And, I was kind of like a late bloomer. And then eventually, I hit. Yeah.
Amazing to me when I hear those songs from back then. It's still unmistakably you, in my opinion. You have that sound at an early age. Did you sort of always have that sound and style, or did you develop it?
Well, I think I'm maybe developing some. I remember there was I went to, I grew up in a pretty large church, right? And then in my teenage years, I joined a really small church and, became kind of a big fish in a small pond. And we had a guy join our church. He had gotten out of the Navy and he decided to stay in Oakland and instead of going back where he was from. And he had a tape recorder and all the young people at the church would go over his house and we'd socialize and we'd sing. And he says, everybody sounds good. He said, but the tape recorder loves your voice. I remember him saying that, it was like, the tape recorder loves you, loves your voice. And so then I started thinking that I had something distinctive, and but the church was small and didn't have a lot of microphones. I think it was only one microphone that was for the preacher. And if you were leading the song, they'd pass it around to you. But if you were just singing or if we did congregational songs, you just had to project. And so it was a lot of women in the church, and their voices are high, and I'd be singing these congregational songs, and I couldn't hear myself, so I just started trying to say, I got to find some way where I kind of pierce through that, and so I kind of developed that. And then, growing up playing the trumpet, trumpet players, the first thing we want to do is, play high. And so the combination of those two things I think helped me develop, my style.
And did your experience with trumpet, did you then know how to read music and have some foundation musically that helped you?
Well, I knew how to read music. I knew basically the treble clef because the trumpet's on the treble clef. I did have a teacher, Mr. Leffler, who would occasionally, when I would come into class, would say, hey, Williams, I said, yes, sir. And he's like, you're playing the trombone today. The trombone's on the bass clef. And he says, well, go on and play it. And it's like, I didn't like him really, it's like, why did you do that to me? But, now that, I'm older, I realized what he was doing. He was like, I want you to understand, both staffs, and, but when I was singing in church, I don't really think that I looked at it from a point of view of, lines and spaces or anything like that. I just kind of did what I felt. I think that the kind of music that I grew up with, church and R&B and things of that nature. When I was coming up, it was about emotion and feel, and but I do understand how important reading music is because someone can sit on the side and they can analyze it and they can say, oh, usually this tempo, so many, the beat is, you can count it out and, you can kind of, look at it and analyze the structure of the chords and things like that. And you can mimic it and you can basically, reproduce it or write songs in that particular genre because you studied it and you have, kind of a cerebral or mathematical, approach to it. But mine at that particular time was more about just my feel, the emotion of the music. And I think that's probably the way it all started, in the cotton fields, of the South. It was all about emotion and about feeling and life and the way life was affecting you and your family or whatever, so, and I think that it's really important not to lose that. I have friends that, gone to Juilliard and to, all the Berkeley School of Music and things of that nature. And it's like, okay, you got all that down, but you don't want to, sanitize it to the point that you lose, that Ray Charles feel or that kind of thing like that. You get. I mean, I think that's true for not only music, soul music, but I think that's true. I mean, Hank Williams Jr. Or Hank Williams Sr. Really, I would just imagine that he was just, just a soulful cat, and just singing, hillbilly music and singing, the music that he heard growing up.
You don't want to over intellectualize it, and you got to keep that grit, and the emotion, So absolutely. So being in that area in the Oakland area, how much were you enamored with people like Sly and the Family Stone and, Tower of Power, who obviously we're going to talk about, but, some of these really Grateful Dead, some of these really well-known Jefferson Airplane, were you really into that, or was it just like the rest of the country? They were just, these bands making music.
Well, so some of them was just some of the bands making music, and then some of it, I was really into it. I went to church with the Stewart family, which is Sly's family. So I would see them all the time. Them, the Hawkins family. We would associate with Andre Crouch and Billy Preston. We were all teenagers, and we would interact with them. Andre and Billy, but they were all down in Los Angeles, but we'd have musicals, and they'd come up, to Oakland, or we'd go to Los Angeles, and we'd have these sing-offs. We call them musicals, and everybody's trying to outdo everybody, and so I grew up around that, and I think that it inspired me. Larry Graham was very instrumental in my development. Grew up around the Whispers, people like that, and so there was a lot of blues coming out of Oakland, Lowell, Folsom, Jimmy McCracklin, people like that, were here. And then we had 7th Street, where I lived when I was a kid, where my church was, and the boxing gym, and it was kind of like a Black Wall Street, so to speak. They had a movie theater, and they had clubs just lined up and down the street. And I didn't know at the time, but B.B. King and Sammy Davis Jr. and Cab Calloway and all those people were coming down there when I was a little kid. And my parents would go out, but so I grew up around that, and so I think that was a great influence for me. And so I watched all these guys, Carlos Santana. I'm sitting there watching that happen. Watching Sly and the Family Stone happen, watching the Grateful Dead happen. Hanging out with Mike Bloomfield, and just up there trying to find my way, but yet trying to not get caught up in the vices of drugs and all the other stuff that was going on in the movement at that time. So being cautious, but yet being there and just watching people that I like John Fogerty, somebody that I'm seeing working in the stockroom, and then 8 months later he's headlining the Oakland Auditorium, and Harrison, is it Wilbur Harrison or whatever, who wrote Kansas City, is opening up for him, and it's like it was just phenomenal. But it let me know that, hey, if it happened for them, it can happen for me.
Yeah. So, Lenny, what were the steps or sequence of events that led to you connecting with Tower of Power?
Well, I did a record for Fantasy, and I had never actually been on stage with a band. And so a friend of mine's like, well, when are you going to do a show? And I was like, I don't know. I've got to get a band and all that. And so one of my neighbors told me that the mailman, his side gig was managing bands. And so she hooked me up with him. And he said, we're going to go out to Fremont, and there's a little band out there. So Fremont is a suburb of Oakland, and maybe 40 miles, 35, 40 miles outside of Oakland. And we drove down there, and he introduced me to this band called the Motown Soul Band. And I think half of them were out of high school, and the other half were still in high school. Because I'm 21, or 20, almost about to be 21. I want to play in clubs. And I'm thinking, how are we going to get these kids in the clubs? And so we did a couple of little things together, and then it was like, this is not going to work, for me. So then I went, just started concentrating in Oakland, and I met Larry Graham. And it was really interesting. Sly and everybody had moved to LA to, they went Hollywood and Beverly Hills, and the only one that was left was Larry. And he had a very distinctive car, and it's kind of orange, Pontiac, all souped up and everything, muscle car. And I would see him, and I said, one of these days I'm going to get a chance to meet that guy, right? And I never could meet him. It's just like everywhere I go, somebody would be talking, oh, that guy Larry Graham was just here. I'm like, oh my God, I just missed him. If I'd have been here a half hour early, I just kind of like in my mind felt that if I meet this guy and he finds out how talented I am, he's going to be able to help me. And so but I was snake bitten. I just couldn't ever, tie him down or coordinate. And then one day I'm driving down the street and I see his car with the hood up. And I'm like, oh my God, this is my opportunity. So I had a 1962 Jaguar at that time. And I had every tool imaginable in my trunk because my car would break down all the time. So I stopped and I helped him. I introduced myself and then told him I knew Sly. And we had kind of grown up together. And he said, oh, what are you doing tonight? I said, oh, just nothing. He said, well, come by the house. We always have jam sessions. So I was on my way up there, and then my home training kind of kicked in, and my mom was like, when you go to people's house, always bring something. So I stopped and got a bottle of wine. And so when he opened the door, I gave it to him, and he's like, man, I invite people up here all the time. You're the first person that ever brought something. And so we became fast friends. Next thing I know, when he'd go out of town, he'd give me his keys to his cars, and I go get the oil change, kind of, working my way in, take his dog for a walk or whatever. And next thing I had the keys to his house. And then we just started doing music together. And so we were writing these songs, which turned out to be the first songs on the Graham Central Station album, and he said, I'm going to put some horns on this stuff. I'm going to call this band Tower Power to come over. So they come over and they walk through the door, and I'm like, oh, these are the kids from the Motown soul band, right? So we reunite. I just started writing songs for them. I wrote songs on their album that they did. And eventually, they had problems with their singer. And voila, it's like, hey, Lenny writes songs, he sings, let's get Lenny. And so I got the phone call, and I was like, yeah, I'm ready. And that's how that happened. It's kind of a slow process, cooking. And then all of a sudden it's done. It's ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah. So the lesson there is be persistent, always bring something, and have the right tools.
Yeah, right.
Wow. So that first record, what was it like getting in there and working with TOP and putting that together and hitting so big?
Well, it was really interesting because, when I joined Tower Power, they had that record finished, and Rick Stevens' voice was on it. They even had the album cover finished and everything. So the album cover was a caricature of everybody up there. I guess they took a photo and then they kind of had an artist kind of draw everybody. Yeah, right. So what they did was, hold that up again. What they did was they went in and just took Rick's picture out of there and put my picture in there. All right. Yes, right. And then I just re-sang all the songs. Every song I went in and they said, you want to hear? I said, no, I don't want to hear his voice because I don't want to be influenced and I don't want to copy him. Just play me the songs. Let me do my own thing. So I went in and I did all the songs, bam. And then put the record out. And it was really interesting. I'm driving down the street one day and I stopped at the store to get me a Coke or something. And I go in, that's when they used to sell albums at record stores. I mean, at liquor stores, right? Or any kind of store you go in, they might have a shelf with a rack with and so I see the record, right? So I go pick it up, and it was one of them that had slipped through that had Rick's picture still on the front. I looked on the back, it had my name, as the lead singer on all of these songs, but it had Rick's picture, and I was just heartbroken, devastated, angry, whatever. So it was pre-cell phones, pre-beeper and everything. So I think I went to the phone booth outside and I called my manager and called the manager of Tower Power, and I told them and everything. And so they put a stop to it and whatever. And I was thinking, now that thing is a collector's item. I said, I should have bought the whole rack, you know what I mean? And sell them for $1,000 a piece. So that's kind of how that got started. And then I think I'd written one song for them on that album. I can't remember which one it was, and I had written a song on the previous album, And so then when we did the Back to Oakland album, then, then I just started writing. I think I wrote about 4 songs on the Back to Oakland album. Yeah.
What was it like, Lenny, when you first heard one of those tracks on the radio?
Oh, when I first heard So Very Hard to Go on the radio, it was just amazing. And then my good friend David Stallings, who I wound up writing a lot of songs with, we'd be riding down the street and it was like a hit. So it was like every time you turn the radio on, you would hear it, right? So we'd be riding down the street and it comes, it's like, oh, there you go. It's like, it was just like you couldn't escape it. It was just, it was phenomenal, and it's like, you're working hard to make that happen. You wonder if it is going to happen. There's so much talent out there. And then when it does happen, it's kind of hard to describe, but it was, it's all, elation, at its, at its peak, so to speak. Yeah.
What was it like being in the studio with those cats?
It was fun, it was a lot of weed, a lot of, because I sang with a lot of emotion. So a lot of times I would be singing and I had no regard, to growing up with gospel music and R&B, just very little changes, it's, and so the doctor would sometimes say, hey, ALW, I wrote a song, it's got 15 changes in it, and I'm like, good for you, but bad for me, because I gotta compensate for all those changes. I just can't do my R&B thing. I can't, just be soulful. I gotta be like, okay, there's a change coming up. I gotta, and so some of the music was difficult for me, Below Us, All the City Lights or something like that, that had certain changes. But it was challenging, and we had fun in the studio, most definitely. Like I said, there was, I wasn't like, I had smoked weed before I got in the band, but when I got in the band, it was a lot of weed, a lot of drinking. I never did drink, but I did smoke weed. And then, eventually, the band just a lot of people don't know, but the band became just a huge drug band. It was all the way, everything from weed to, heroin, Quaaludes and, which I never got involved in. I didn't do any heroin, the cocaine stuff, but we had, four guys in our band mainlining heroin, and I listened to these kids down in Houston, this certain derivative of rap is called screw music, where they slow it down real slow. And it's, it's like, it's real popular, right? And, screw music's out of here. I said, no. Tower Power invented screw music, because we hit a town where, the heroin addicts would score, and we'd be, what is hip? And tell me if you think you know. And then Garibaldi's back there trying to hold in it. If you're really hip, they just slow down, and it was like, I said, so we didn't do it. We didn't invent it cerebrally, but by what was going on and the way that the guys were slowing down and nodding out, that were on the heroin, it definitely, was a challenge to, to keep the groove up, because we had 2 of the guys were in the rhythm section. And so, definitely, that's where the rhythm of the band comes from. And so it was interesting, and it's really funny. We'd be getting ready to go on stage, and everybody's doing something. So they're smoking weed, somebody's drinking, somebody's banging, somebody's snorting. And I happened to do a show with Tower Power, I guess right before Isaac Hayes passed away, for a radio station out in Oakland. And so we decided we'd do some songs together. And so we get ready to go on stage, and then Emilio's everybody gets in a circle, and they're holding hands and they're praying. I'm like, oh my God, this is such a 360-degree change from when I was, young and we were in the band. Everybody's, drugging up, and now, here everybody's praying. And so it's nice to see that people over the years are able to, overcome, their addictions and things like that. And I'm just grateful that, that never dove in. Maybe put my foot in the 3 feet, 4 foot. But anything beyond that, I shied away from, and I'm grateful for that.
What was the chemistry like of the group, though? I mean, obviously, it was something special. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, we got along really well. There was, I seen Emilio fire a couple people, and so obviously there were some things going on that I wasn't privy to. Maybe some personal things that happened. Willie Fulton get fired. A guitar player. Then they brought Bruce Conti in. So there were certain things that that were happening, and but for the most part, everybody we all kind of got along. People from there was different cultures. Emilio was Greek and Mexican, and the majority of the band was European. Descent. Me, Chester, African American, but everybody seemed to get along. Most of the time. I remember after our So Very Hard to Go came out, and Mimi came to me and says, I see that that a lot of people on the radio now are saying like Lenny Williams and Tower Power. But he says, that's okay, and I didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't have a publicist, a private publicist or anything like that, but I think that there might have been a little rumbling about it. And I remember we were on the bus one day, and we were in New York, and we were heading somewhere, Connecticut or Boston or something. And we were, 4:00 in the morning, everybody's tired from the gig before. And we're just riding down. All of a sudden, Mick Gillette says, "What are you going to do, Lynn? What are you going to do?" And I guess they're thinking that, that I'm leaving the band or something. I wasn't, planning on doing that. And then we kind of got in an argument, right? And so it's like, I'm standing up, well, F you or whatever. And he's like, and then I'll never forget it. Rocco was nodding out, from the heroin, right? But somehow or another, he manages to wake up, and he looks at me and he says, he was an AAU wrestler, right? So I'm thinking, oh, I better kind of end this confrontation real quick, because I can see this bus is rolling down and jumping up and down, and I could just see myself, in a knot, I'm in a knot between, these seats and everything. So it's like, I didn't wave the white flag, but I used every bit of diplomacy that I had ever seen or been taught in my life, to quell that. So Mick and I, we would laugh about that before he passed away, how close we came to, getting into it, and at that time, I wasn't even contemplating leaving the band. Later on I did, but for the most part, we all got along. But I think that you got that many people and guys, and you got ego, and people writing songs. Some songs get in, some songs don't. That you're going to have differences of opinion, of people feeling like that that they're not being treated equal, or they're not getting enough of the pie. But I never, there were never any fights or anything like that. It was everybody, they handled it. It was civil, very civil.
Where did you get your inspiration and talent for songwriting?
My mother absolutely loved country music. She loved it. And then, I grew up reading the Bible. And I remember that I read the newspaper a lot. I like to read the books, and I remember reading. God, I can't think of the name of it. I'll think of it sooner or later. But a book, and they had a thing on songwriting. And then I would just kind of like listen to records, and I'd say, oh, they got a little part where they kind of come in with the music, which I later found out is the intro. And then they have a verse, and, they kind of talk about, sing about what the song is. And then they do this, little part where they just keep on talking about the title of the song, which I eventually realized was the chorus. And then they go somewhere, you know, crazy. And then I eventually realized that, that's called the bridge. And then they come back to what they're talking about, which is the chorus, and then they do another verse. And so that was the structure that I kind of learned. And it's kind of interesting now. Most of these modern songs don't even have a bridge in them anymore, and that's like, well, where'd that go? Yeah. And so I just kind of started learning. But my mom, like I said, she loves country music, and I mean, it's like the stories in country music are, just really interesting. I mean, they just sing about anything and everything, every aspect of life, and the song titles, and so I just kind of got my inspiration from that, and I just just started trying to develop it, just writing songs, like I said, and in the Bible has so many parables, and then I just started realizing that songwriting is really about life, and you just keep your eyes and your ears open, and you're going to hear, song titles and, songs every day, what people say to you or what they say to other people or whatever, and so I just try to keep my eyes and ears open and do a lot of listening. And so whatever is on somebody's mind, somebody's heart, whether it makes them feel good, makes them feel sad, or, or whatever, those are all stories. And if you can condense that into 3 minutes, back then it was 2 minutes and 56 seconds, if you want to get a record on the radio, or 2 minutes and 13 seconds, it kept on going up. Now some of these songs are 5 minutes or whatever, but average. But, so that's kind of like how I, developed it. Yeah.
And when you were laying down the vocal tracks for Tower of Power, did you get much direction or suggestions? You just kind of came up with your own parts and your own nuances? And
yeah, right. Yeah. So, yeah, I never, nobody said, hey, say, hey, or, yeah. So basically I, did that all on my own. And eventually that's what led me to really feel like that a lot of times I think that songwriters, should get writing credits on a lot of songs, because and some people disagree with me. They say, hey, people take liberty, with the instruments, and they do whatever. But usually, with instruments, you going to, when I was in Hollywood, people come in and you got the chart written out, and they read the chart, and bam, and every now and then somebody would say, well, you might do something, and the arranger would say, no, I don't like that, or just stick to the chart, or yo, I like that, or whatever. And then I said, well, if somebody wanted to write out a chart for me to sing, their melody, then so be it. I could do that, and but you don't get, the oohs and the ahs, or or anything like that. And it's really kind of interesting because I listen to, music like, Frank Sinatra, or listen to Nat King Cole. It was basically, they just took a melody that was given to them, and it was more their voice and their phrasing of that. But there weren't a lot of ad libs. Sometimes I try to think, when did ad libs come into music? With the vocalist, and now it's so predominant. And but I mean, I don't. I've never just like put my foot down and said, well, I'm just going to sing it the way you gave it to me. Because I want to do a good job. I want people call me and I want to be a part of successful records. But in my mind, I do think that songwriters who improvise, singers who improvise on a record and make it happen should get some equity in the songwriting. And a lot of people disagree with that. But. That just still is the way I feel about that.
Definitely some gray area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you recall when you first came up with some of your signature stylistic elements, like the, I can't sing it all, but the oh kind of stuff?
No, it's really interesting. I don't know how I came up with that, to be honest. I thought I knew when the first time I did it, and then I was listening to something on YouTube a couple years ago, and it was like, oh, I did that 2 years before. I thought that when I thought that this was the landmark, this was the origin, and the first time I did it, and so I don't really know, but I do know that I just in my mind I'm thinking, well, I like the way Otis Redding sang, and I was listening to a lot of Otis Redding, and a lot of times he was very staccato in some of the stuff that he did, especially in the vamps. And I'm just wondering, was that a derivative, the oh that I do, a derivative of some of the things that he did? But I really have no idea, but I think it was post Tower Power. I know that. I mean, it's, as far as being on a record. Now, maybe I did it sometimes, while I was there, and in a live performance. But but just going back and just kind of like looking at the records, the first time I ever heard it was post Tower Power, and but I don't think it was like a cerebral decision. I'm gonna do that right here. I think it just came out, and then I remember I was doing it a lot, and then after "Cause I Love You" came out, and I was doing a show in New York at the Bottom Line, and I was reading an article about the record that I had just put out. And one of the critics was somehow how good the record was, but he thought that I did the oh too much, right? And so then I just made a decision that I wasn't going to do it on the following record. And then I was like, sometimes I look back and I say, well, did I make a mistake by letting someone else's position or on that affect my creativity, or my approach to a record, and say that I'm not going to do it, and but it's just interesting. But it has it has really been beneficial to me, been a blessing to me that I came up with it. How I came up with it, when I came up with it, I have no idea.
Well, I think one of the great credits to you, at least from my perspective, is you're one of the handful of singers really that I'll find myself hearing somebody and thinking they have, I'll say they're Lenny Williams-esque, or that they have that quality to their voice or their style, because it's that distinctive.
Well, I've been told that, and I just do what I do. I think I had some degree of developing it. You know what I mean? Developing what I do, my style. And then a lot of it, I think, is just that, just where I grew up and how I grew up, the fact that I played trumpet, the fact that I went to this little small church and I wanted to hear myself when we sing congregational songs. It's like 35, 40 people in the church, no microphones, and you got all these women singing and my voice is not, coming through. And just a blessing and, good fortune that what I do seems to resonate with people.
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.